honor of Jay, we're thinking about changing the name of the show to Our Matey. You had to have been there. Welcome again to perhaps this planet's most visible Transcendental Topless Club. Where, for the benefit of those of you with allegorical interest in erotic matters regarding consciousness, I will be performing table, even lap dances, metaphorically speaking, for your enjoyment, but with the intention of you leaving here and going out on your own and pursuing the real thing. And now the stuff. One mystical night, once he realized what the road was to the prize, hired a servant to ride along behind him and remind him of what he already knew, which worked as well as any other makeshift trick. But the warrior ultimately understood that no one, save himself, could travel with him to any advantage. From the darkness a voice was heard. "Why is it so lonely out here?" And the answer being, because you ventured out too far. You ventured out too far with too many, and with no comprehension as to who they are or how they might be abandoned. A myth, including transcendental ones, are only good as long as there are two heads involved, one to tell it and one to listen to it. The place beyond myths, that is, the source of their reality, is a land of but one head, one brain, one mind, one story, and with no one to tell it or to hear it told. It just is a tale that rides along only with itself. There was once a city above which sometimes hovered an observation balloon. Each time a man engages in routine automatic conversation, he reinforces to himself the ill-founded sensation of having a permanent mental self. It is said that one of the greatest of the ancient mystical kings had tattooed on his tongue that highest of heroic reminders, "Shut the fuck up, Your Grace." It is said that one of the ablest of the great mystical warriors progressed from being able to keep his words to himself to being able to turn a deaf ear to what his own brain said to him. One man came to realize that there is a conspiracy controlling the lives of men, and that furthermore, if one can see it clearly enough to be able to describe it, one can be at least partially freed therefrom. Then there was another man who held himself for ransom until he awoke to the fact that there was no one to come bail him out. Although compared to the other creatures on this planet, it is man's mind that allows him to make sense of life. It is also his mind that tells him that much of what he sees and experiences makes no sense whatsoever. Is that neat or what? Part 36. Originally, in the anatomy of man, the brain moved about in the body same as the blood. But due to the urgency of his evolution, it soon settled down in a permanent location, same as the liver. One of the unknown historical lineages of human literature. First came science fiction, then mythology, then religion, then economic fiction, known as economics. Then religion again, then philosophical fiction, sometimes known as "What Happened to Religion?" Then history, then political science, in some areas called external dreaming, then psychology, and now finally Gothic romance and international diplomacy, with science fiction in the wings awaiting a comeback. The education of man by man only makes sense as long as men have no idea as to what really makes sense. The support of the opposition points out, however, that those engaged in the construction of carousels do not have to know where the buck stops. For if thou runnest off routine mental juice, the buck never stops for thee, for thou art the buck. This being known in certain non-standard areas as the endless economic circulation. As long as your thinking focuses on specifics, based on an assumption that they are of individual significance, you will forever see only local examples of the universal and never anything of actual consequence. In the original consciousness of man, thoughts moved about freely, with no more pattern to their actions than those of the clouds in the sky. But due to the demands of his evolution, they soon settled down into a more predictable operation. There was once a man who decided to undertake a wondrous journey from where he lived to Shangri-La. And in the beginning, the trip seemed most serious indeed. Then it seemed less so, and for a while even humorous. But then it finally became serious again. Then just a little less so. Then back to a bit more serious. Then slacked off again. Then picked up again, and like that. If there is a real like that. The moral is that even the most dedicated traveler doesn't actually know where he's going until he gets there. Or indeed doesn't. The above was another chapter from Who the Hell Laid These Tracks Anyway? By its native design, the mind wants to deal with the predictable. A correspondent writes to say that he has now his own private definition of mysticism relative to its more commonly recognized crude cousins. Puts it thusly he: mysticism is religion and psychology with all the useless verbosity removed. In a postscript he notes, looking at what I've just written makes me realize that my new addition to the discussion simply adds to the cacophony and confusion, and that any real meaningful attempt to describe the mystical would consist of saying nothing. And in a PS to the postscript further notes, of course I knew that already also. Thinking is a cloud of din, confusion, and smoke to help lead man to a better world. I don't get it. Part 84. A man asked a weighing machine, in the world of man, does better equate with more complex? And the machine answered by handing him a card that said, you'll meet a tall, dark woman with an outboard motor. The siren song of the collective consciousness of man to each individual mind is, lean on me. A man asked a mystic, when you've made 100 unexpected observations about man, is that enough? And the mystic replied, yes. And the man asked, when you've made 50 unexpected observations, is that sufficient? And the mystic replied, yes. And the man asked, how about 5 or 10 such observations? Would that number be adequate? And the mystic replied, yes. And the man asked, then is there a number of such observations and comments that are too many? And the mystic replied, yes. And the man considered this for a moment and said, then am I correct in assuming that this superfluous number is determined by the degree to which you understand the purpose of man? And the mystic replied, yes. A man asked a fortune tree, what's the use in getting your body into healthy conditions and filling your mind full of knowledge when you know that you're eventually just going to die? And the tree replied, count your rings. Tonight's Listery Hessen. Life on this planet used to be lived by children. Anything beyond the point of used to, believe me, you don't know about. In the early stages, one man conceived of the awakened as being those who could bear to hear anything. Then later he began to think of them as being those who didn't have to hear anything. Tonight's health warning regarding stupidity. To be dense is to be tense.
Yeah.
The reason that consciousness seems a more complex affair than, say, breathing is because men normally sense the operations of their brain to physically cover a larger area than those of the lungs. It's simple once you see it, but hard as the dickens to get your mind to remember and think about it. There was once a man who wondered what mortal existence would be like if the heart, for instance, had an awareness of itself similar to that experienced by the brain. There was once a man who wondered, nay, even marveled at the thought of what man's life might be like if he had an awareness of awareness in addition to the brain's awareness of itself. How Things Could Go, Part 117, regarding possible interruptions in the normal line of mental bequeathment. As part of their living legacy, one electrician rewired his favorite nieces and nephews. All visible forms of the mystical quest are its lesser forms. One guy thought, I wouldn't mind so much being ordinary and stupid if you didn't have to be so serious about it. Of prime importance to physical existence is consistency of physical sustenance, and likewise is man perceived to be the situation mentally. Only those who push their consciousness beyond the normal frontier find the situation otherwise. Legend has it that there was once a mystical order whose sole method consisted of telling men to put a finger of their left hand to any place on their head and then put a finger of their right on another. There was once an unusual city which tried to keep an observation balloon overhead. Another way to spot the ordinary. They're the ones who enjoy being told they don't measure up. The enjoyment, in fact, helping make their position tolerable. Mystics, on the other arm, not only don't like being told that, but in fact, moreover and better yet, can't hardly bear being that way. One reason that man has experienced so much more success in treating his physical ills as opposed to his mental ones is that his physical ones actually hurt and mean something. Another reason it's so rare to find a mystic under anyone's professional care other than a mortician's. Upon finally becoming cognizant of his terminal mental condition and the useless expenses normally incurred in any attempt to prolong its life, one man took the more efficient approach of shooting himself in his x-rays. The transcendental exercise of escape velocity suicide. No one merits censure save those who know better. The simple will conclude that things are more complicated than they actually are. And the simple who've read a book or been out of town a couple of times will in fact make them so. Moral, when you see the simple coming, don't let them see you. There was once a most unusual city which attempted to merge with its observation balloon. From the Mystics ABC Primer, any question that has a yes or no answer isn't worth fooling with. And this reading from the Mystical Traveler's Advanced Severe Handbook. All talk is a substitute for getting there, or at least trying to. One guy decided to practice truth and blues advertising and changed the name of his favorite song to Got My Mojo Working, but it only works on sex. A more conscious man could also be described as a person with no permanent mental address. And finally, tonight's transcendental Terry fail. There was once a father who knew the secret, and in an attempt to at least hint to his son the nature thereof, he told him this story. There was once a man who was forced to put on a set of long johns, which he eventually came to dislike. And then through some extraordinary, though unnecessary effort, he took them off, and there he was. The end. I said it was the final item. Picking up a piece of something we were talking about last time, and reminding you that the only reason I'm using examples that apparently, or examples that do occur out in the world, is because of the fact there are operations going on inside of a man's brain, commonly referred to as his consciousness, of which he cannot normally be aware, and certainly is not subject to an external description of the operations, because if you're ever going to get any grasp of it, you have to do it yourself. That being the case, may I insist to you tonight that this is specifically a hint at what I was talking about 3 programs ago, the kind of thing having to do with the actual operations of a man's brain, of which he is never aware, and which is right at the heart of what this kind of activity has been about forever and ever and ever, in addition to 10 years beyond that. It has to do with the fact that, let's just call it again, a kind of mystical way of thinking, any sort of extraordinary thinking. It is not simply in opposition to ordinary thinking, it as though it is existing in another world, another dimension. In one simple way, that to ordinary minds, what this is about, even my best, or most people's best attempted description, it apparently has no personal payoff. For instance, last time we were talking, the subject that I had verbally set up, or the framework, was the fact that you, by man's own definition, not by mine and not on the basis of some subjective criticism, but that the way men normally think is stupid, that looked at intellectually, men ordinarily, all across the board, the heart of civilized, educated, sophisticated men, just to refer to them intellectually, from what should be their own viewpoint, what could be their own viewpoint, is that they're stupid. That's the best definition. That they do not use the mind to the extent that it can be used without any extraordinary effort. That is, without any drugs, without going off and becoming a hermit, without joining a mystical society, without knowing any particular trick. The ability to think, to use the mind, to a greater extent than they do, is an absolute certainty. It is that's a fait accompli. But now here's the more specific example that here is it a little more directly tonight, my attempt. If you recall last time, I was speaking of the fact that any allegiance to a belief system, to any ideas, but I know it's normally called belief system, it makes it sound easier to refer to someone in their sense of patriotism, or into someone who claims to be a true believer in some religion. It's not just an idea here and there, that it seems as though it is something that is codified, organized, that has some common, if not universal, significance. And yet, not from my definition, recall, or from anyone's, but if you told an ordinary person, if they said that they were that they devote their life to trying to be a true Muslim, and you say, well, you're stupid, they would immediately assume, defend themselves, but they would immediately take that as being an anti-Islamic remark. Or if they say, well, I try to be a Christian, and you say, well, to whatever degree you succeed, you're stupid. They would take it as being, so we're Catholic, anti-papal. If you got into a little less specific, I already went through the nationalism description to you last time, but if you tell someone that they're stupid by living according to some set of rules, or that even by their claim that they try to align themselves with some belief, they cannot see what you're talking about. And it doesn't matter what apparent set of beliefs, what philosophy, what religion, etc., to which they attempt to align themselves. It doesn't matter that. But now let's up it a little bit. Let's give my fictitious person I might be talking to a bit more credit, that they are at least pushing their individual use of the intellect. If I talk to an ordinary person long enough, let's say, and they begin to see, and they went, okay, I almost hear what you're saying. You're saying that it doesn't matter, say in the religious belief, that it doesn't matter what religion you align yourself with. That if you actually pay allegiance to it, and you quote the Bible, the Quran, the writings of Buddha, the Old Testament, whatever it is, to that same degree, you have shut your mind down, regardless of whether there's any truth, validity, pragmatic information in the Holy Script, in the religion to which you are aligning yourself. Regardless of that, you're saying that to the same degree that you simply accept that as being the Alpha and Omega of all reality and all truth, then to that same degree, you close down your mind. And if I went, yeah, better. That we got them almost to the point that, by their own definition, that almost to the point of some ephemeral objectivity. That for some reason, this person got to the point that they saw, even if they had started out and said, well, yes, I am Jewish, and I said, well, to the same degree that you are faithful living an orthodox, upright life, you're stupid. And if they realize, wait a minute, I understand, you're not attacking Judaism, you're not attacking me, you're attacking, or you're trying to get me to consider that to the same degree that you pay strict allegiance to some set of beliefs, that you're not speaking about whether they're right or wrong, you're simply saying that you're closing down your mind. If I go, yeah, can you get it that far? And through whatever trickery, because of Mars being lined up with a Ryder, the home office of Ryder truck rental, just that he temporarily, that if I got a man to the point, and this is possible, that they could say, okay, I hear philosophically, I hear theoretically what you're saying. Here it comes, here's where it splits so far. And remember, this is not a point about religion, it's not really a point about allegiance to any belief system. I am talking about the operation of your brain, and I'm talking about something that either, I'll give you a choice, either cannot be described directly or it's closer to what I said I would never tell you anyway. But it's something about the brain. It's not just the secret, but it's right there having to do with the operations of the brain, but I'm just not going to tell you. But that's what we're talking about right now. We're not talking about religion, and we're not actually talking about the ability to even come close to any momentary objectivity of the mind. So remember that. But if I could get a person up to the point that they would momentarily, for the sake of discussion, go, okay, I think I see what you're doing. You're saying that a person would be better off intellectually. They would have wider possibilities, etc., if they were not aligned, if they did not pay real allegiance to a belief system as we normally think is to our advantage. And I said, yes. Here is where it absolutely goes into another reality, because it now quits being even the possibility of a diametrically opposed tug-of-war of some kind. They would say, all right, if I could do that, what is the advantage? And there is none. There is no advantage. There is no advantage for a Christian to quit thinking strictly like a Christian. There's no advantage to anyone, to whatever belief system, however they think now, to say, well, you've absolutely shut your mind down. No matter that your belief system, no matter that Christians are considered the, whatever it is, that how widely accepted it is, what a common phenomenon, and that you've just shut your mind down regardless of that. And if they followed it that far and realize, okay, it's not an attack, and you're saying, I understand theoretically, but now tell me this, if I did not do that, if a man did not think in allegiance, in alignment to some system, if he did not accept the ideas of others, what would be the advantage? And the answer is quite simple, none. In a way, people know that already. That's why they don't even fool with it. They don't even bother to stop long enough to consider it. They certainly don't think about it in words, but they're almost, in a sense, some of you may understand this, in a sense, life has them already far beyond that, that they're way ahead of me. If I was going to engage in this kind of conversation and try to get someone that's appeared to have some ability, some potential ability to actually do something vaguely resembling individual thought, just vaguely. And I wasted my time engaging the person and got them up to the point for them to see that me saying that you're stupid to be faithful, to claim allegiance to any belief system, you're stupid. Absolutely, it's just a sign of stupidity, and that's all. That's all it is. And if they got to the point, if I could bring them up to the point verbally in a conversation, as I just described, that they're, okay, I see what you mean. Oh, yeah, I see, yeah, okay. It's as though life, though, has already told them, got them way ahead of me, that they know where it's going. And they know that they're going to eventually ask, okay, well, if I did that, I see what you mean. But if I actually tried to do that, what would be the advantage of it? And they know the answer. They know I'm going to say, well, there is none. So they think, safe again. Because the ordinary mind's always safe. Always safe. Which again, for those of you who always seem to like it, is one of the small little joys of hearing people always worried about being overtaken, their mind overtaken by some mad cult. It's to think the kind of, quote, mind, the kind of intelligence can be overtaken by some crackpot cult. People just don't understand the beauty of justice. It's everywhere. Even I still like it. Think about people, and the world's full of people that consider themselves quite intelligent, but express great fear in listening to too many unusual ideas, least some insane crackpot idea overtake their mind. The one thing you do is think, well, you poor old dear, you poor thing. maybe a couple of aspirin, some prune juice, and you're right. Probably stay home and lock your doors. Of course, they don't have to. All they got to do is just carry on like a normal human being. At any rate, I didn't know whether any of you got that, but it's as though life... Does everybody understand that life does this conspiracy that people fear? It is conspiracy. Because people can't realize who's running it. But I could get somebody. As I said, an ordinary sane person, if I could engage them in conversation, I could get them up to the point very easily for them to theoretically see what I meant by my earlier comments. Anybody that lives by any belief system or aligns them, their thinking, pays allegiance, is an idiot. They're a fool. They're a dunderhead. They're just stupid. I could get an ordinary person, if they'd listen to me, to go, oh, all right, well, I see what you mean. But one reason they can do it, and on the other hand, one reason that they won't do it in general, that I have to do it on an individual basis, if I wanted to, tried to. But why collectively men will not, they pay no interest to this, pay no attention, is because it's as though, and this is not just a simile, this is not just a metaphor, but to make it at least partially palatable, all right, swallowable. It's as though life is way ahead of me, anything that somebody like me could say, that already that they know what's going on. That if they stood there and listened to me talk and went ahead and went through the game, probably take 2 or 3 minutes at least, and then they'd have to make some mental effort to even do this, which is more than most people want to do, period, anyway. I mean, most people feel about mental effort the way the rest of us right-thinking people do about running and jogging. All that kind of wasted effort. Anyway, it's as though they know, well, why should I even talk to this guy? Why should I let him try and go, all right, I'm not actually talking about whether you're a Christian or a Jew or a nationalistic Italian or whatever. It's not that in specific. It has nothing to do with examples. It's just that you close your mind. And it's as though people know in advance, all right, I can go through all that, and I know what he's talking about. He'll make me see it. I'll have to go, well, yeah, you're right. And then I'll have to say, okay, but even if I do that, I mean, that's pretty interesting, not you put that way, but if I do that, what will be the advantage of me, to me? And he's going to have to say, anybody smart enough to be able to do that to me will have to tell the truth, because anybody knows anything never has a secret agenda or plan going on, and so they're right. I'd have to tell them the truth. They say, wait a minute. Now, I hear what you're saying now, theoretically. But let's pass it past theory. I assume that you're saying that people actually do that. Or that's what you're inferring. That's not just some philosophical theory. And I'd have to say, well, yeah, that's kind of what this is about. And they went, okay. Then, I got the theory of it. I hear exactly, you're saying that if a man in some way had no prior allegiance to any system, to any belief system, to anything, that if he was always like constantly starting afresh, that his mind would be capable of new ideas and etc. I go, yes. You go, I got the theoretical. But now you're insinuating that there's more than theoretical. And I go, yes. I already see this man has had to make mental effort, take 2 or 3 minutes out of his busy life, go through this, and he says, right, what would be the advantage to me? And he knows. Anyone, when I say me, anybody could do this to him, talk to him, he knows I've got to tell him the truth. That he'll say, all right, what's the advantage if I actually tried to do it? Assuming it could be done, what would be the advantage? And I would look at him right now and go, well, there is none. So why should an ordinary, sane, busy person go through all that when they know it's going to amount to nothing? That they know that the answer, and they go, well, what if I did that? What would be the advantage? None. Again, it's why, amongst other things, this is such a solitary activity. It's such an uncommon activity. Why it seems to be so secret and hidden for the wrong reason is it's actually because it has no advantage. The only advantage it has is to people who are wired up to see the advantage. And nobody can tell you what that is because I just described it. If you're wired up to see what the advantage is, that wherever you first ran across it and you read some idea of the great mystical quest or work or the search for the prize, the grail, trying to reach enlightenment, and you read and you thought, that's what I want. If you were actually wired up enough that you're still in some way involved with, you still have the hunger alive, then you know that the advantage is whatever you think it is. That the advantage, you have to be wired up to see the advantage. That there is no way to describe it. That the truth still would be. Now, when I said me, of course you people I know, or I assume know better, but anybody watching on TV or new to this, I'm not just speaking about me. Because anybody, whoever you thought was some past physical hero, Zoroaster, Moses, if you'd ask them, person to person, like, well, if I pursue all this, what's the advantage, to me personally? They would say, well, none, certainly none. I mean, if that's your question, there is none. See, because someone who's wired up to do this, they don't go up to Buddha and say, wait a minute, if I do this, what's the advantage? As soon as they hear it, their only question is, how the hell can I do this? They never ask, what's the advantage? Nobody ever went to Jesus that knew anything, or Muhammad, and said, hey, if I actually followed what you're talking about, what would be the advantage? He'll tell them the truth, which is, it serves 2 purposes. The truth always serves its own purpose, but he's also serving the purpose of getting them out of the way. Not wasting his time, because he tells them the truth. The whole truth, I just told you. They just would bypass the superfluous part. If someone has to ask you what's the advantage of doing this, the real answer from a Buddha or somebody would actually be, all right, quote, if you have to ask me, there is none. That's the real answer. But I assume you people understood that. That would just sort of confuse it to the ordinary questioner. You just tell them, there is none. Because those who are wired up to do this, the question actually never arises. The question of, well, it's like somebody once, if you were pursuing it, forget that you were being a Buddha or somebody actually involved with it, if then somebody asked you that you don't even claim to be enlightened or with awakened consciousness, you're just involved with it. And somebody said, well, you're still fooling around with that, aren't you? And you, well, okay, yeah. They go, Jesus, what's the advantage? You know the answer. You can't tell anybody, what do you mean, what's the advantage? It's just, I got to do it. But I mean, when you first read about it, you didn't go find out, wait a minute, I want to know, by God, this thing enlightenment. I want somebody, how you do it? I want somebody, by God, to point out the specifics and tell me the advantage, maybe I'll do it. Question never arises. The right kind of people, you first hear about it, read about it, and you go, that's it. And that's the end of it. Then you got one question, how can I do it? Do you remember, I'm going to remind you, in case I am not talking about religion. I'm not actually talking about being able to expand the range of your thinking processes I'm talking about a certain operation of the brain. Your brain. Having nothing to do with religion, those are just specific examples. Those are just local examples. Any ceaseless involvement therewith, also, which will keep you from ever seeing anything of any consequence. Because there's nothing greater to figure out about, well, why do people get interested in religion? Why do people take up some nationalistic cause or some religious cause or political cause or economic cause? There's no reason. That's just a local example of what I'm talking about. It's just an external, local example of an operation of your own brain. Consider even when it's, from ordinary views, this happens continually. You can hear it or read it, I'm sure, every day in the news. That people seem to have undergone some shift in their thinking. That people do seem to have changed their view, to even expanded the parameters or perimeters of their intellectual processes. Such as, where shall we start? There just happens to be a good one now. There is a detective. How's this for Captain Irony, now that he's left us for good, I hope? There is a detective in need of a kidney transplant. There is a prisoner, there is a man on death row in a certain state whose case, this particular, that's not even that important, but the detective happened to be involved with originally. The condemned man is now petitioning the court not to execute him in the style prescribed by that state's penal code, because it would ruin his kidney, and he wants to donate his kidney and do some good in life. It is now tied up in the courts, and that particular state's spokesman for their penal system, his attitude is, no. The law says, you get fried, you get fried. I don't care what it does to his kidneys, I got no control over it. And the prisoner is saying, I want to give. I want to contribute something to life. And now, this ex-cop who's dying if he does not give a kidney. Anyway, they interview him. And after they point out the slight irony and this and that, here's just a typical, this happens every day. It happens, I can come up with other examples, but you already got them. But he says, it's strange. It's strange how things work out, because, as you might imagine, I was in law enforcement for 30 years. I was an absolute, firm supporter of the death penalty. And now, doing a pose of a thoughtful, but now, I'm going to have to rethink my position. You know I'm not being sarcastic, those of you who watch, or I'm not engaged in some sort of irony. That is the only way that people engage in anything resembling rethinking my position, is it has to have some personal advantage. They could be interviewing somebody in, I can think of a part of the world right now that used to be considered fairly civilized, been engaged in several years of just horrendous supposed bloodletting, neighbor against neighbor, and it's divided up nationalistically, racially, religiously. It's just a great little area of blood-slinging activity. And they'll interview somebody and says, well, I used to live next door to, let's say there's some Christian. And they say, well, I used to live next door to Muslim families here. But now, since the breakup of our country and all the hostilities, I would hear about the name Muslim, just everybody involved with it. I hated their guts. And then yesterday, a bomb blew up here in our building, and my granddaughter was just, I looked down and she was just, looked like she was dead, bleeding. Her arms ripped, flesh torn. My leg was broken. I couldn't get out of the building. And suddenly, a figure showed up, grabbed her, rushed to the hospital, and it turns out there was a Muslim. Now, as much as I hated them, and felt like with good reason all the dastardly deeds they'd done, this has now happened. And I've got to rethink my position. And you hear them constantly here in this part of the world, but people who, I used to be in favor, I used to be as strong as they call it, pro-choice. having to do with abortion. And then so-and-so happened with my daughter, or this and that. And now I've got to rethink my position. You're just used to taking it, not just mine, but grab your own brain and don't let it engage in ironic views of sarcasm toward humanity. This is taken. I'm just using TV again as a quick little screen to the whole world so that you don't have to look at yourself to start with. But here it is, it is taken. The whole tone of the little interview, the whole tone of the little news piece, the tone of the reporter, you can feel it. You're just used to it. Is we take it as being an encouraging sign that the person says, yes, I was vitriolic in my hatred of Muslims or pro-lifers or convicts, whatever it is. And he says, but now, and you can feel it. There's no music like background scores for news, for interviews as there are movies, but you're so used to it now, it is part of the woof and woof weave, woof woof, of contemporary life, that there is a certain kind of solemnity, damn near reverential solemnity, that this guard says, well, 30 years in law enforcement. And you can imagine the kinds of things I'd seen and experienced, and I was an absolute, unconditional supporter of the death penalty. Kind of pause, you can almost feel it choreographed. Although he hadn't practiced it, he goes, but you know now, referring to the fact that maybe his one shot at continued existence is this local convicted murderer trying to get the court to relieve him from the sentence of actually being executed so that they could extract his kidney and give it to this man. He goes, but now, pause, dramatics, and it is kind of serious in its own simple, stupid way. Again, I'm saying stupid on the basis that they're so close that there is the reality that men can think better than they do, but they do not do it on the basis that it has any meaning. But here he goes, I was a firm supporter in the death penalty. I would have pulled a switch on most of these people. I just thought that they were the scum of the earth. And they've just got through interviewing, just a couple of seconds ago. This guy with his head shaved, ready to be electrocuted, that says he has now got his attorney petitioning the court to stay the sentence. Not for himself, but because of the horrible deeds he had done in life, he now wants to be able to do something. He took life before. He's an admitted killer. But now he wants to help give life. And so it flashes back to this guard. He's laying there, laying in bed, and the dialysis machine here, and him looking pitiful, and him saying, yes, you can imagine the kind of anonymity I felt toward killers. But now, I have got to just totally rethink my own thinking, my own position on the death penalty. As I said, in a way, it is sort of encouraging. Not this one example that means nothing, but of showing that humanity's minds are capable of some expansion. But it's almost, I say from one level, it's sort of encouraging. And they are presented in a sense, or with a certain flavor of them being encouraging. Like, doesn't it make you feel somewhat enthused about life that people can, and even they will use the term, that it has now, this instance in my life, has made me have to just rethink my position on such and such matter. And it sounds as though, there could be some guy that would have been like I said, a race hater, or he could have been violently opposed to some religion. It turns out that the person of that religion, or that nationality, whom they previously despised, for good reason as far as they were concerned, but now it turned out that unexpectedly they saved the life of their granddaughter, did them some unexpected favor. And they say, and for years I hated the sight of them. I hated their name. But as you can imagine, after this episode, it has made me, I have had to rethink totally my position regarding the exclusivity of one religion over another, the superiority of my nationality toward my neighbor. And in one sense, it is encouraging, but it's in a stupid sense. Because the only way that people are driven, when I say stupid again, not by my opinion, on the basis that there is evidence. There, of course, I didn't need it, but I'm saying there is evidence thereby concerned that a man can expand his thinking. But a man will not, an ordinary man will not, unless it has some advantage to him. What kind of? That's why it is so open. I kept warning you, don't fall into some internal of your own trap of sarcasm. Go, well, yeah, it's easy for a guy to go, well, I've got to rethink my position on the death penalty. Well, yeah, it's easy. Now his one chance for him to live is for this condemned killer not to be electrocuted so he can have his kidney. Well, hell yeah, anybody would say, I've got to rethink my position. You understand? It's encouraging and it's not encouraging. It's just a continuation of stupidity. That is, that men will not do that with their mind, which they know is possible. There's the proof. But, notice, again, this is not an attack on ordinary people. Because with ordinary people, if they listen to all of this, forget my 2 or 3 minutes with my previous fictional person, if I got another person to listen this long, not 2 minutes, but the last 40 minutes, and I took him this far, he would still be left with the position about, all right, I can follow theoretically everything you've said. It is not all that weird. Yeah, I follow it all theoretically. But the question he would have is like the guy previously, my guy, he'd say, but if I did that, you're saying that why can't people go ahead and rethink their position on whatever it is without it being to any advantage? What's the advantage in doing that? And the answer is still the same. Well, none. If you have to ask. There are, I keep saying that, there are actually advantages, but you don't go around talking about it because it won't work. If you have to tell the advantage, well, all right, the obvious advantage is this, it will cure all mental problems. It will relieve stress. Make you feel better? I mean, that ought to be enough to say, well, it just make you feel better if you did it. But see, here's the thing, the kind of people who ask, who are going to have to ask anyway, if you went out, if a Buddha, a Muhammad, a Lao went out and started trying to teach some public form of the quest and said, all right, there's another way that there's something you can do with consciousness that people don't normally do. And people go, okay, what? You go, well, it's kind of hard to explain. As we go along, if you want to stick with it, I'll try to describe what I know and what I discovered will work. And they go, well, okay, well, first off, what's the advantage if we follow it? And you go, well, it'll make you feel better. Then I've got almost anybody, assuming that they took it as legitimate and in some way the speaker had the power, that the kind of charisma and salesmanship, the ability to sell it. They went, listen, it will make you feel better. You will just feel better about being alive. And people go, well, by God, I'll try it. Those who had to ask, it's not going to make them feel better because they can't do it, or they wouldn't be asking. That was just kind of a side little road, in case some of you wanted to know. Anytime you see a system being promoted, anybody that's preaching mysticism under any name in a evangelical manner. Well, I put it to you before in several news items. As a guy told his son, a father, his son, don't ever buy anything that somebody wants to sell you. That's it. Because if you had to tell somebody that here's the advantage to being more conscious, you're lying already. Because if they got to hear that there's some advantage, then even if there is an advantage, such as I told you, you'll feel better. If you had to ask, if somebody said, well, I'll try it, but tell me one advantage, and I said, you'll feel better, I'm lying. Because I would know that they're not going to feel better. Because I knew as soon as they said, well, what's the advantage? Because anybody who's wired up for this, most of the people, those people seriously are interested in this. Such people, they never ask me, well, what's the advantage in this? They never even cross their mind to ask. And you think, well, you're right. Of course, some of it should strike you as a little strange. I don't mean just by you knowing me, but to think back years ago when you first heard about it, and you thought, I got to find, is there still a Buddha alive? Is there still an alive, knowledgeable Sufi? I've got to find him. But it wasn't on the basis, I got to find him and ask him what the advantage is. It never even crossed your mind, which I'm assuming a few of you may be chuckling now over that kind of sort of soft, non-aggressive irony over, well, you're right. I've been chasing this all my life, and it never even crossed my mind to think, what's the advantage? Kind of weird, isn't it? Weird, kind of weird part. I'd say somewhere 46 to 52, 53. May I remind you in conclusion, this doesn't have anything to do with religion, doesn't have anything to do with race, nationality, belief systems, philosophy. It just barely has anything to do with thinking itself. What it has to do with is the operations of the brain. There was one, I'm not sure that it read so correctly, so maybe if I add some visual theatrics to it. There was a news item tonight that said that there is reputed to have been once a great mystical school who had one teaching, used one method. That was, it taught people, or it told them to take the finger of their right hand and place it somewhere, anywhere, on their head, then take a finger of their left hand and put it somewhere else. Period. That was the end of the news item. Okay, it's time for questions. Yes? The man wants to know what would be the advantage of doing that and how it's related to what I was talking about earlier this evening. There's not, and it's not. Ma'am, yes? Man wants to know how to get out of here. Obviously, he's not going to be trapped by some crackpot cult. I am assuming that anyone with any reasonable intelligence, that momentarily, every time I bring that up, even people who can't see much more, at least they should get a momentary chuckle out of pointing out the kind of silliness to people who consider themselves upright, intelligent, not woolly-brained, not passive sheep, but people who are serious. And they say they're concerned not about themselves, but their children, who are also upright, intelligent people, and their family members, and their neighbors, about, by God, being fleeced, being hoodwinked, having their minds taken over by some devilish cult. Even ordinary people who can't normally see more than that, they should get a momentary chuckle like, that is kind of silly because you have intelligence, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't have to finish it for you, do I? But they do not look upon the captivity of their own mind when it's not in the throwers, in the grasp of anything that could be referred to as a crackpot cult. They do not take that as being devilish. They do not take that as being in any way detrimental to their mind. If it were not for belief systems, if it were not for, not cults, but cults that get big enough to be a publicly acceptable form, well, such a Christianity, as everybody knows, was originally a cult. I mean, a weird cult. They all were. But it is not now a cult. It is considered one of the pillars of civilization on this planet. It is one of the anchors of intellectual stability, of mental stability on this planet. And all of us who know anything should be in favor, again. Those people who say they're Christians, support them. I mean, you don't have to pay or go out of your way, but if they, when you hear somebody say that they fear that Christianity may be weakening and that we all should be in favor of it and support it, if you're out in the crowd, holler, yeah. Or Judaism, Islam, anything. Anything that supports the continued mass civilizing of man, you should be in favor of. Any insightful person is in favor thereof. But they are cults. They are allegiances to the mentally damned. It is a form of stupidity, if you know better. As I said, what makes it really interesting part, I guess it's about 40, is that everybody knows it's stupid. Just ordinary people. That's what I simply get you to see tonight, because if you can talk to them, they will agree that theoretically, yeah, I see what you mean by saying I'm stupid to do that, or a person is stupid. I see. But just tell me this. If you actually tried to struggle against that, if you in some way were trying not to do that, what would be the advantage of it? They ask sincerely, and equally sincerely, I'd have to say, well, none. Well, to kill out the rest of the tape, there was a news item tonight that said there was a great mystical school whose one method was to tell people to take one finger of their right hand and put it somewhere on their head, and then take a finger of their left hand and put it someplace else. And I believe someone had a question. Oh, man wanted to know what the importance of that is and how it is related to what I just spoke of earlier. And the answer is, it's not, and it's not. Does that sound familiar? Did you put the fingers back in the same place on your head? Not if you were watching. No. I didn't. I was doing it for you, but I don't know that intellectually you do it. How far removed could that be from what we seem to be talking about? I'm out of material. Can you turn the tape off? That was as much as I wrote tonight. God, this is humiliating. Turn it off, quick.